Welcome, everybody, to a football show, Thursday edition. My name is Braden. He is Zach Lyons, and football is here, buddy. Football is official.
Back.
Football is here. Brought to you, of course, by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. We'll tell you more about Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group in just a minute. But, of course, big show today. I had a chance to get a couple of questions with Jeffery Simmons exclusively following the scrum there. Got to talk to him about sort of his preparation process, how things are different after the Titans finish the season, and has that changed his process after the contract, and what does leadership actually mean to him? He's talked a lot about leadership this summer, so what does that actually mean? Talking to guys, got a couple minutes with Jeffery Simmons, so you hear from him. We've got a practice to discuss. They're going to have another one, I think, Friday, Saturday, and then all next week. Zach, you and the guys will take care of everybody next week, but lots of stuff to do. Talked with Chad Brinker, the assistant general manager for strategy. Got to chat with him about what is happening in the analytics world. So we'll talk some analytics. You've got some DeAndre Hopkins contract information out there. So a lot of stuff to discuss. And yes, we might even discuss why Mike Herndon hates the Tennessee Titans. D, good to see you, my man. So welcome everybody to the show. If you want to jump into the comments section, please ask questions about practice that we saw. By all means, join the party. We do appreciate it. Rate, review, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Stackingtheinbox.com if you want to read about John Ojukwu, the starting right tackle for the Tennessee Titans.
There you go.
If you want to read about that. So Football and Other F Words podcast, as well as everybody, all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. So DeAndre Hopkins contract numbers, first and foremost. Let's get into it. Zach, 2 years, $25 million, 10.98 guaranteed, 9.8 signing bonus, 2023 cap hit, 3.7 million, 2024 cap hit, 16 million. And it appears like there is $8 million you could save, much like the Kevin Byard contract. Am I correct? Around March of next year, should they cut him?
Yeah, his is specifically if he's on the roster the 5th day of the league year. So they have 5 days after the league year starts to cut him, or 4 days technically.
Okay, in which case they would save about $8 million, $7 million-ish in dead money. So your initial reaction when you get all these numbers seems like it's a pretty low risk for a pretty high potential reward for the Tennessee Titans and Mike Vrabel and Ray Carthon, no?
Well, it's the same as every fucking contract they've done. I mean, we were kind of talking about it, in a group chat, and it's like someone asked, well, the way this contract structure, what do you put the chance that DeAndre Hopkins is there next year? 25%? And I'm like, I don't know, 50-50, because everybody they've signed is on a 1-year contract. Someone is going to have to see a extension or second-year deal, because look, Ryan Tannehill, 1-year contract. Kevin Byard, essentially a 1-year contract. Derrick Henry, 1-year contract. DeAndre Hopkins, 1-year contract. Azeez Al-Shaair, 1-year contract. Essentially, the Andre Dillard, 1-year contract. Aaron Brewer, a 1-year contract. Daniel Brunskill, a 1-year contract. Luke Gifford, a 1-year contract. I mean, everybody is like a 1-year rental, and someone out of that group is likely to see extension. I would put, obviously, Kevin Byard up near the top. But, I mean, depending on if this guy goes off for 1,200, 1,300 yards, he's worth the money next year, especially when you have the cap. And that's the thing is, when Julio Jones was cut, it's because they didn't have any cap space, right? No cap space. They were uptight against the cap. Next year, it's just like, okay, well, maybe they will let someone, ride out a $15 million cap hit next year. Right. I mean, why not? I mean, especially if he performs well. Now, if he comes out here and gets injured or is obviously slow, but everybody's on a 1-year contract. And so we think that this Titans team looks entirely different. Next year's Titans team is just going to look as entirely different as this one, maybe even more so. So it's very much par for the course. It's right where the cap hit, where most people expected it to be. We talked about it on Football and Other F Words on Wednesday. The DeAndre Hopkins contract was used as a negotiating tool to convince Kevin Byard that he's doing the team a solid. Yep. $3.5 million cap hit. They were like $8 million before he restructured. They didn't really need it. They didn't really need him to take a pay cut.
No, but Kevin Byard, it seems, was very clearly told, do this for DeAndre Hopkins.
Oh, yeah. Negotiating tool. It's just not really true.
Yeah, right, exactly. So again, it'll be very interesting. Zach in the comments says, if I was a Patriots fan, I'd be upset that that's all it took to get him. I think that's pretty accurate. It's funny to think that this team could be without Henry, Tannehill, Byard, Hopkins, on and on down the list. That they could all just be gone next year, and that will get. We'll talk a little bit about, and I know you guys talked about it on F Words, the sort of the importance of Willis or Levis, somebody doing something this year to prove that they are the guy. And we'll discuss what we saw, at least in the first day of practice, coming up a little bit later on in the show. But it's a very real possibility that like the 4 or 5 most popular Tennessee Titans are gone next year.
It's Jeff Simmons is going to be the John Travolta meme where he walks into the room is like, where is everybody?
Like, it's Will Smith at the end of the Fresh Prince, right?
Yeah,
he just walks.
There's that too.
Like, what? Where did everybody go? You'll hear from Jeffery Simmons coming up a little bit later on as well. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to the contract negotiation side of things. I think it's just another sort of like give the entire organization, Rand Carthon, the staff, like Vrabel for having the relationship, et cetera, sort of like the entire process has worked out so that we at the first day of camp, we're watching DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks run routes together with Kyle Phillips and Chig Okonkwo for Ryan Tannehill. If you would have told me that was happening back at the end of the draft when Vrabel said, oh, don't worry, we've got a plan, essentially, tongue-in-cheek, like that's what he was saying. Who knows if he actually meant DeAndre Hopkins. But if you would have told me that's what we would have been watching in day one of camp, I would have kind of been like, really? You think so? So you got to give – I mean, we have an issue at right tackle. We'll get to that. But there's you got to give the staff, the organization, a lot of credit for getting this team back to a place where there's a lot of energy and momentum and excitement, not doom and gloom, roster, depth, receiving core. What are we going to do?
Well, and if you look at it, I mean, right now, as it sits, if he were to, for whatever reason, get cut today, it's a 1-year, $10.98 million deal. If he reaches the per game roster bonus, which I would assume this is kind of why I like Spotrac. Spotrac puts in like the details. I think he played 9 games last year. I think 9 or 10. So he's probably like, it's probably 11 games is the per game roster bonus. They don't say, but if he plays 11 or 12 games, whatever the roster bonus is set at, then this turns into a 1-year, $12 million deal. That seems about right, about where we all thought it was going to be, right? Like, I've seen a lot of people say, well, this obviously isn't the people who thought this was about the money. They were obviously wrong. No, this is kind of what we all thought the deal was going to look like. I mean, I was a little surprised it's a multi-year deal, just a little bit. It's my preferred method, but I was just a little surprised they did it. But technically, it's a 1-year. Max he can earn this year's $12 million, and then he gets cut next year, and there you go.
Yeah, I think, and if he plays 12, 13, whatever the number is, like you say,
that's good for the Titans.
Is that worth $1 million? Like, you're damn right it is. So it all, again, I think it doesn't make, and I think you guys were talking about the perception of the Titans organization, and I think we saw this with Mahomes in the quarterback documentary. You guys were talking about on F Words, just that there's a lot more respect for the organization writ large inside NFL offices, inside the rooms, inside the coaching rooms, inside the players' locker rooms, inside the administration, front offices, than there is in the national media, than there is in local media, than there is in, sort of like the national group think, right? The zeitgeist of the Titans does not match what they really think of it. And I think that speaks to sort of why Hopkins is here, why Kevin Byard took a pay cut, why people are willing to come play for Mike Vrabel. Do we know if the Rand Carthon decisions, all of them are going to work out? They probably all won't. But if Azeez Al-Shaair starts 17 games at middle linebacker, Daniel Brunskill is your right guard, Arden Key is a pretty decent player off the edge, and the young players do well in the first year of the draft. I mean, yes, Carthon's going to be tied to Will Levis. I get that. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of appreciation for what they're doing right now across the league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can't look at this team totally different. And even if they don't get George Fant, who, by the way, I think a lot of people are just kind of overhyping. Yes, he's probably better than Jamarco Jones, but how much better remains to be seen. He has 2 good seasons out of the 5 or 6 that he's played. The rest of them have been absolutely abysmal in terms of pass blocking. So I don't know. I guess it sounds like he's asking a little too much money. But at the end of the day, I feel like that the Tennessee Titans are in a much better place. It's just we let the 7-game win streak skew too much of our perception of this team. And I was trying to bring everybody out of that, right? All offseason, I've been trying to bring everybody out, say, no, this year you have to do a clean slate, right? Because right now they're all healthy. And right now they still have Mike Vrabel. And right now they have, Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and Treylon Burks and Chico Okonkwo. And now they have DeAndre Hopkins. Like, it's just, you got to get back into the mode that this team, it's a loaded AFC. But when you really think about it, Jets and Buffalo and Miami all in one division, going to be hitting their records hard, right? Because, it's going to be really hard to get a double-digit win team out of there unless someone really falls off or someone really explodes. It's probably going to have to take both. You got to imagine that the Chargers and the Denver Broncos are going to see a rebound and be a little bit closer to Patrick Mahomes, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that we see a repeat of 2021 in more ways than one. And I'm not talking about just win-loss record. This team could be a sneaky pick to win the entire AFC. It may not matter if they win the entire AFC, but they have the easiest division. They have a second-place schedule. And they have DeAndre Hopkins, and you couldn't have convinced me that even with Julio Jones, they would have been the first place in AFC.
That's true.
So, it could happen. It could happen.
And weird thing. I'm still more like 9 wins, win the division kind of team, but
it's just you just can't look at this team you're not giving
they don't
you just ignored everything I just said.
No, that's not I think saying that they're going to be the 1 seed in the AFC is I just don't agree with it. So we can get to why that is in a second.
Could be
sure, but what I would say is, what did we say all of last summer? Well, the AFC West is going to be the greatest division of all time. Well, it wasn't. So we just don't know, and I think that speaks to the Titans, and it speaks to the other teams as well. I think I would put any amount of dollars you would like to put down that they are not the 1 seed in the AFC. I still think there is, and this is while two things can be true, I still think there are major depth problems, major questions that this team needs to work through, some of which I think they will figure out, and that means I trust Mike Vrabel, I trust Tannehill, I trust the identity and the culture of the team, and I trust them that they can win the division. I don't know what their ceiling is because of their depth and their overall roster talent. That being said, it doesn't mean that they're not now much more exciting. Everybody at camp on Wednesday, because of and it's not just DeAndre Hopkins. I think it's because season's here and the training camp's here, and that's just more exciting. The energy levels on 1 day of practice and I don't know how vibes is like a bad way to put it because that's just such a intangible, vague way to describe it. But the competition level, the compete between the offense and the defense was different. The energy at the press and the media was different. The energy with the staff was different. There's the energy in the receiving core and the passing game was different. It's all trickling down from they've figured some things out. They got the Bayard contract worked out. They got Hopkins in, and it was on play 1. Christian Fulton came up and basically tackled DeAndre Hopkins on like a 5-yard out route where Tannehill fires a dart to him. Hopkins catches it. And Christian Fulton, they're not wearing pads. Let me remind, they just have on helmets. This is a no-contact drill. And Christian Fulton basically form tackles him. And I took that to mean we got some egos here that need to they're puffing their chests out. Christian Fulton has a lot to prove. When I'm going against DeAndre Hopkins, it's a different level of compete than when I'm going against, Nick Westbrook-Akine. No disrespect to NWI, but it's just different. He elevates everybody around him. Defense too. And Christian Fulton was feisty the entire day. And I think Titans fans should want to see him like that. But they threw at Hopkins 7 of the first 9 plays in team drills. He was the guy. He was the target, and he caught almost every single one that Tannehill threw. The energy level was totally different.
Yeah, and that's great. for me, it's like I've heard this before. I've heard this whole entire story. I heard this story last year that oh man, Ryan Tannehill's demeanor is different, and this team's really feeding off Ryan Tannehill. The previous year, oh man, Julio Jones and AJ Brown are really putting it to on the offense, and doing all this stuff. Like I hear it, I get it, and I'm not saying that people can't be excited or anything, but like as far as buy-in goes. I need to see that energy when he comes back from moving his family, which have been the thing. Like I need to see him actually practice more for that kind of hype. Like I want to see that. I want to see that same energy. The hotter it gets, the more physical it gets. That's when I'll be really excited when the pads come on. Like when the pads come on, to me is like real training camp
freaking
stuff.
Freaking Thursday, insanely hot, by the way.
Yeah,
just nuts so hot. Wednesday was actually quite nice out there on the practice field. I'll say this: it's just tangibly extremely different from OTAs and minicamp.
Yeah,
how about that? Like, there's no Byard thing. There's no Hopkins is here. It's very different. And again, I'm not suggesting that he couldn't end up getting hurt and missing practice, and it doesn't work, and it's similar to all the other old receivers that the Titans have brought in. It felt a little different in that Hopkins feels more stable. Like he just looks like, this is hard to describe because Julio's always kind of been a little bit more brittle just in general. And because of the style of play, which we've documented ad nauseum, I think like Hopkins it doesn't mean one shot or one cut doesn't hurt you. And it could happen to anybody, but he's clearly the number one receiver on the team. When you look at him with Treylon Burks right next to him, Treylon Burks looks like a way better number 2 than he does a number 1. So it's just the whole as we talked about on Monday, the positionless football, the freedom that DeAndre Hopkins provides Tim Kelly to move pieces around. Pretty boy Kelly to do different formations, and they did all of it on Wednesday. I mean, it was their Phillips with Burks with Spears and Henry and Josh Wiley wasn't out there, but like they were mixing and matching a lot of dudes on the offense, and it was interesting. The energy levels were high. They completed a lot of passes. We'll get to Willis and Levis in a minute, but Hopkins, tangible difference, and he just feels like a pro's pro, if that makes sense. Just being around him, it's just Julio is a quieter guy. Like he's just sort of.
He also hates practice. I mean, he like legit hates practice.
Yeah. No, Hopkins it was clear that the fact that he was lined up made everyone on the defense fired up, not just the offense. So,
well, it's great because we finally have a wide receiver that has that diva-ish edge that will stand by his diva-ish edge instead of like I don't know if you saw the X where he re-X'd, I guess you would say, or quote X'd.
I'm calling it tweets. I'm calling it Twitter.
That's incorrect. That's factually incorrect. So okay. I guess he quote X'd this. Did you see the Pendergrass guys? Sean Pendergrass?
Yeah, I saw him basically.
Fantastic. And I love it. I love it. And he didn't delete it. It's still up. So I'm here for this. I mean, that's the kind of stuff I want from DeAndre Hopkins.
Rob Moore told me this like 4 or 5 years ago. He said, look, the reason AJ Brown is good, you got to have dog, man. You got to have dog in you. And it's a very common phrase for receivers. When the football's in the air, it belongs to you.
Right.
That's what that means. And DeAndre Hopkins is the prototypical definition of dog. Like the ball's in the air, it's his. And he's going to go get it. And he did it all through team drills. Treylon Burks had a couple nice catches too. Chig had an extremely impressive catch. Kyle Phillips had a nice catch. Like starts to rub off. That's all.
I'd like to
one practice.
Yeah, I'd like to take quick aside because this depth thing that everybody keeps bringing up like it's an exclusive Titans problem, and how many teams do you think don't have a depth problem?
You've brought this up on a previous episode.
Yeah,
I
know you don't know everybody's depth, but
right.
I mean, like throw out just a number of teams that you think that, well, it doesn't matter who goes down, they got someone that could step up. Obviously, besides maybe the quarterback. Let's take the quarterback side of it.
Well, I think again, I don't cover the other teams, and you probably know the rosters way better than I do. I would say
this is not a gotcha thing. This is just a conversation that we're having. I may do this as a article though.
I think So what's interesting about this is I think Vrabel's very good at finding those guys, and maybe we joke about Njoku being that guy, but maybe that is that guy. I mean, they clearly invested in him as a UDFA. I think that there are 1 to 53 teams that are just far more talented than the Titans, and if the Titans lose a player, just one player at a number of positions, there's teams that have like tight end rooms that aren't going to be reliant on a second-year player to stay healthy all 17 games. There's plenty of tight end rooms that if Chigakonkwo gets hurt and doesn't play, I'm not suggesting that everybody doesn't take a step back, to your point, but like the Titans have nobody to run routes at that position if Chig doesn't play.
Well, Wiley or Weil,
he wasn't out there.
We land on it. Well, yeah. So Wesco wasn't out there. Mike's already given up on Wesco. So are you giving up on Josh Wiley?
Trayvon Wesco caught a.
Well, I mean, he wasn't out there for the previous,
yeah, that's true.
Previous months. But
I just mean even with the guys they have, Raider, Wesco, I think Mac, who I think who was worked into the rotation pretty heavily on Wednesday, who I thought had a really good minicamp, showed a lot of athleticism. There's just not many guys on the roster that can do what he does.
Yeah.
And so they're like, if they lose a safety, like, is it Elijah? Okay, Elijah Molden, great. But then now you're thin at corner. And again, I agree with you in your point in that the whole design of the NFL salary cap and the way they move play and the way that the player movement system is structured is to keep everyone churning players and to have everybody be thin. I get that. I just don't think the Titans are one of the most talented rosters I mean, I wouldn't put them in the top 5 or 6 or 7 in the AFC. And so they're a.
Why do you think that's changed though? From, I believe, the first summer that we did this, we said this was the deepest roster, which would have been last summer, right? Like, I guess we said this was one of the deepest and best rosters in the AFC and in the NFL. And now all of a sudden that's not true after they got rid of dead weight.
Well, you can't call David Long dead weight the way you rave about David Long's play during most of the season. I mean, I think last week you called him one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL until he got hurt.
I mean, the dead weight could be a catch-all for the majority of the players, like Bud Dupree that they got. I mean, you're talking about one guy.
I think the key is.
I mean, is David Long the linchpin of this whole roster for you? I mean,
no, I think it's a combination. It's the reason John Robinson's not here. It's like the culmination of a lot of different events.
So we were just wrong last year.
Maybe.
And now you've adjusted
and maybe I'm over adjusting, which is possible. But the way the NFL works is, and this is again, I think your point, that it's very difficult to just maintain status quo in anything that you do in the NFL from year to year, other than like a star quarterback who's under contract for like 9 years. Other than that, it's just hard to maintain anything. Oh, great offensive line play, great pass rush, great secondary, great receiver. Like, it's just hard. But a culmination of bad John Robinson drafts outside of one in the last 3, you trade away A.J. Brown, your Taylor Lewan retires, like gets hurt and doesn't play. Like, things have happened. And I think over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, the team has just thinned out. And the idea is that the very cheap free agents who I like and the draft class of the last 2 years, which I like, are all going to have to be asked to play bigger roles. And that's all. And that's possible. But is it 1 seed, 2 seed, 3 seed in the AFC possible? I just don't see it.
Yeah.
Is it win the AFC South? Yeah. Yes. I think they absolutely can win the AFC South. Yes.
I think it's just interesting how everybody's viewpoints have changed over the course of a year, when we got rid of players mostly that weren't available or weren't very good. And it's just interesting. I don't think anybody's right or wrong. I just think the discussion around it is just interesting.
Yeah, and like last year's safety search, right, in the middle of throughout the course of the season,
it worked, right? Like for the up to till those safeties got injured too. I mean, like there's a difference between, I think I see a lot of people talking about that some teams just mask it better. Well, Mike Vrabel was masking it with the best of them.
Coach of the Year award.
And he did a Coach of the Year award. He just couldn't duplicate that, again, suffering through another historically injury-plagued season. So, I don't know. I think, like, Mike Vrabel, I think that's where I get hung up on everything, is like it all lives and dies at the feet of Mike Vrabel for me. It's like Mike Vrabel, if this team stays 2021 healthy, right? That team still wasn't the healthiest.
Right.
But I feel like this team's a lot closer to 2021 than the 2022 health-wise and talent-wise. So I kind of look at it and go, if 2021, we'd never really thought that in the middle of the season, this team was going to go on a big run and beat the teams that it did and get the AFC #1 seed. So I'm not saying that it's likely. I would put it at like a 30% chance likely right now. Just because of all the other divisions, not really because of the Titans, but because I'm looking at it from a mathematical perspective of all the other divisions and how they improve. But in the season, that's probably going to fluctuate up and down. I'm just saying.
I like
Mike Vrabel can mask a lot of the depth to a certain point.
Sure. So at the start of the season last year, basically the pass rush group is the same, except for instead of Key, it was Dupree. So now you've got, and I'm going to land the plane here on this in just a second. Sinkers Beverages Kingston Group, by the way, folks. I think the secondary is very versatile and deep. I actually think a lot of the group. Do they have an all pro back there other than Byard? Maybe not, but I think they're very talented. I think they're deep. They've got options. Their 5th and 6th corners could be Trey Avery and Chris Jackson. I think they've got a lot of pieces back there. I just don't feel that way about almost any other position. And here, as an example, every major free agent that we have penciled in as a guaranteed starter that has to be a performer, guys that we both like, Al-Shaair, Brunskill, Dillard, Key, all those guys, not starters on other teams, meaning they were depth pieces, which means they were valuable depth pieces to the other teams. And now they're starters here. I think that's sort of a depiction of where this team is from a depth standpoint. Doesn't mean they're bad moves. I like those players. I think they're very smart moves by Rand Carthon, but not one of those guys was a starter for the Eagles or the Niners or even Jacksonville to some degree. So you're taking guys that were backups and putting them in your starting lineup. Again, I'm not saying it's the wrong move. I'm just saying factually that sort of shows you where those other teams' depth is relative to where the Titans are. I think running back, I like the pieces. I think there's depth there. I'm not as worried about it. I think if you need Julius Chestnut to be your number 3 or whatever, I think there's depth there, but not a lot of other positions. Offensive line,
Speaking of running backs, this Jonathan Taylor, Jim Irsay thing is not doing great.
What's the latest? So I know Irsay was basically saying running backs are stupid.
Well, he said,
what's the
NFL
latest?
running back situation, we have negotiated a CBA that took years of effort and hard work and compromise and good faith by both sides. Yada, yada, yada.
All of which is true.
Yeah. Yes, sure. A lot of hard work and effort. To say now that a specific player category wants another negotiation after the fact is inappropriate, some agents are selling bad faith. First off, that's a straw man argument. Running backs just want to get paid more. They don't want to change anything in the CBA. They just want to get paid what they feel that they are worth to the team. They feel they are underpaid. That does not mean they want to be overpaid, which is the other straw man argument as well. It's like, well, you can't overpay for running backs. Look at the teams that overpaid for running backs. Well, why don't you just pay them correctly? Okay, so that's my little rant on that.
But aren't they getting paid correctly?
No.
Why not?
Because they are getting paid. They are, most of these backs that are wanting money are 3-down running backs that are super important to their team they probably take the most beating out of any position on the field. And they also have to pass block. They have to pass catch and all that. They're not getting paid relative to their talent and what they put forward.
I don't disagree with you there, but they're getting paid relative to the
kickers.
risk. The risk of the position, though. And if I'm running a business, I'm factoring in risk of the position, which you're right. They do take a beating and therefore miss more games than somebody else. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, they've all missed time. They all miss games.
Every position misses times.
And they're replaceable.
Yeah. They are. That's the key. And that's what we talked about, is that they're replaceable. But that doesn't mean that they have to be so woefully underpaid. There is a middle ground to be had. They're not being paid appropriately. They are being underpaid and undervalued. And it took 2 guys to take up 1 Derrick Henry. And a lot of these players, there's nobody so far the Chargers have been able to find to duplicate what Austin Eckler can do. So there is certain situations, and I'm not saying like I'm not saying Deontay Foreman needs to be getting paid like $10 million a year or anything. But like Austin Eckler needs to get some money thrown his way because to his team, he is the only guy they can get, right? So, like, anyway, his agent, Jonathan Taylor's agent, said bad faith is not paying your top offensive player, which is totally correct for the Colts, by the way, currently. And then Ian Rappaport tweets out an Around the NFL article that says, hope this relationship can be fixed, ... And the Jonathan Taylor's agent quote tweets it. Oh, sorry, quote X's it, QX. I doubt it with the what you got.
I mean, I'm torn on the running backs conversation.
I mean, we're talking like a couple $1 million. I mean, we're not talking.
McCaffrey gets paid $15 million. Is the highest paid running back in the league. The franchise tag is 11.
And he's every bit worth it.
11 million. Okay. So pay him 12 or 13. Like what are they holding out for an entire year, missing out on all this money just for like $2 million a year? That part, I see both sides of it. I totally agree with the value of a running back if they are a special player.
There's also, I think
but I get,
we had that maybe this is the CBA thing they're trying to change, that I think running backs should be allowed to negotiate their extensions quicker than other positions typically do. Like, because a running back is so front loaded in their availability, their youth, their prime. Yep. It's a small finite time. I mean, you don't get. I mean, technically, I don't know. There are a lot of older running backs right now that are actually still kicking the trend because just how the world works. I just think that there is. I think a hold in is always the way to go. Show up, don't get fined. Do a hold in. But I think what they're trying to do is smart. They just can't get too big to their britches and lose the message and they don't fly too close to the sun. Yeah. I'm very much that there is a middle ground in this whole running back thing between being way underpaid and way overpaid. And I think there's a middle ground that they need to try to find a way to maximize the talent and revenue.
Well, and to your point, Taylor and Barkley, like Barkley is worth a lot more because the Giants are in win now mode. And he's more of their offense, and they don't have a lot of weapons. Whereas
they got like 13 slot receivers.
Where the Raiders are like, what are the Raiders supposed to win this year? What are the Colts supposed to win this year? Like, I understand where they're coming from a little bit more. Whereas, but also Barkley's been hurt more than Jacobs and Taylor. So like, we can go round and round on this conversation.
It just depends on the situation. Like, I don't think that every running back deserves to get paid more. But I think there are situations where some people should get paid more. I think Jonathan Taylor should probably get paid more because you may think it's so easy to find a running back, but you're trying to find a running back that could duplicate what Jonathan Taylor does. And that is a little bit different than trying to find a running back that duplicates the output of, let's say, Kenneth Walker or someone like that. I mean,
I just think it's good. I mean, I was going to say, like, Kenneth Walker's the example of why you don't pay Jonathan Taylor. You just draft him in the second or third round. And
they just drafted Zach Charbonnet too. So,
all right. So Stinkers Beverages. Let's talk about this real fast here. Kingston Group, before we talk a little bit more camp, hear from Jeffery Simmons, talk some analytics as well. Stinkers Beverages, of course, up in East Nashville. You've got Bluegrass up in Hendersonville. Obviously, join the in crowd and the BOB up there. At Bluegrass, those are sort of just customer appreciation groups. You join the clubs and you get access to cool things like allocations and new whiskeys and new bourbons and fancy tastings and events that are coming up and all kinds of cool stuff. Obviously, shop at Sinkers. You can search Uber Eats, by the way, and have the booze delivered directly to your door.
They drive so you can drink.
Obviously, there you have it. So just search Sinkers on your Uber Eats app and just have some long drink delivered right to you. Sinkers Beverages, of course. Check them out. Kingston Group, buildkg.com. I don't even need to say anything, do I? Like, don't you guys already know the drill here on Kingston Group? Buildkg.com. It's the website. Talk to them. Got any questions about your house? Call them. Okay? I've told you a number of times. Just call them. Kingston Group. Okay, so you want to hear? Let's hear from Simmons here. I had a chance. He did a lot of scrum stuff after practice on Wednesday. I got a chance to get him sort of one-on-one. It's not very long. I only had a couple of questions, but I had a chance to ask him sort of, after a 7-game losing streak and a new contract with sort of that as the framework, did he change anything? Did any part of his preparation or his process entering this season change? And here's what he had to say.
Nothing changed other than, I guess, the way my mindset, I guess, I want to be better than I was last year. Each year I find out that one thing that I know that for sure I could have worked on a little better, especially coming into the season. during my offseason training. So I wouldn't say just because we, especially lost some games, it's about right now. Like I said, that bad taste not in my mouth no more. It's about how can we build our team going forward from here.
And you've talked about leadership this offseason. What's that look like when you communicate with your other guys in your room?
I mean, they listen. I think, it's not just by me talking as well. How can I go out there and do it? If I'm not doing it right, Coach T or the other guys in the room have the right to hold me accountable. So, I mean, the thing about leadership, is not all about front runners. We want to, even when time's going good, time going bad, how can you still be that leader? And that's my goal. I want to get better at that. Sometimes I could kind of forget about that sometimes. So I think the main thing right now is just each and every day push the guys and how hard can they push me.
There you go, Jeffery Simmons. And I think it ties in a couple of different things we've already talked about today on the show. One is expectations for this team nationally in the group think are low. And a lot of those players were asked about it. And a lot of those players were like, don't care. We're paying attention to what we have.
Who would care? Taylor Lewan, and he's out of that. He would be all about it. He always cared about that stuff.
Probably would. That's one. Is that they were asked. Arden Key was very vocal about no, this is garbage. That's ridiculous. We're here to dominate. Jeffery Simmons, you can hear him talking about it. And the other one is the undervaluing of Mike Vrabel and the culture and the leadership and the next man up and the focus. And you can hear Jeffery Simmons, he cares about how he communicates with his people. He cares about how he and Danico Autry and T.R. Tart and Harold Landry and how these guys are communicating with each other, both him towards them and them back towards him. And I think it speaks to, this ties in with DeAndre Hopkins and Mike Vrabel texting DeAndre Hopkins when he wasn't even a player on his team. It is about Vrabel top down creating a communication style and concern for each other that I think is key to leadership and football in general, where it's like a military style brigade, right? You got to have that kind of camaraderie to be good in the NFL. And I think Simmons represents Vrabel, and I think that's represented in Hopkins, and I think it's represented in the free agents and Rand Carthon. And I just thought it was illustrative of the job that Mike Vrabel has done, and that they are all that this whole entire organization is wildly underrated nationally.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't underrate. Or how about this? You just can't appreciate enough when you're doing these rankings how much Mike Vrabel means to the players in the locker room, his messaging to the teams. You see it on how he talks to, like you said, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, he's texting DeAndre Hopkins on a random Sunday after he watches DeAndre Hopkins drop pass, and acting like, why didn't you catch that? And, who else is he doing that to? We know he texts, he goes on the podcast with the Bus with the Boys, and he's texting with Will and Taylor, and you see that side that the players really gravitate to, right? You see the side. The Mike Vrabel we see in the podium is not the Mike Vrabel we see anywhere else.
Yeah.
And it's not that he really hates you guys. He just hates what you guys stand for. He hates having to, and he hates having to stand up there and ask those questions.
Well, we're the reason he makes a whole lot of fucking money. So
I don't think the media is. I mean,
we are there. We are there representing the fans, and the fans are why he makes all that money.
Oh, well, then if you guys are representing the fans, you guys got to work on a lot of stuff because
the media is not perfect. There's plenty of problems, but
we
are the conduit.
Yeah, you could be the conduit. I feel like it's just gone. We're getting back. I see people going to practice. I see people starting to buy in. I see media. I hear it on the radio. I see some kind of positivity peeking through. It's like we're all, you guys are like all the groundhogs waking up. I'm the groundhog that drank a lot of Red Bull, and I've been awake since February. You guys are just now waking up from your hibernation, looking at your shadow and seeing the sun, and the spring's right around the corner.
Are you intentionally lumping me in with a bunch of people who?
Yeah, because you haven't been very positive about this season. I'm trying to tell everybody. This
2 weeks. Well, no, it changed when DeAndre Hopkins was on the team, and I said, now I think they can win the division.
I think that everybody was underplaying what they were even before DeAndre Hopkins, and I think it's because everybody saw the 7-game win streak and is like the Mike Vrabel magic is gone, or they are not valuing or weighing the Mike Vrabel magic enough. The Mike Vrabel magic has not died. It's been around. It's still going to be around. He's just a special coach, and I think that I still hold on to the fact that I think he's one of the top 5, if not top 3 coaches in the NFL. He is just that damn good. And he has his warts. Every coach does. There is no perfect coach. He has his warts. But at the end of the day, he has the respect of the players. He has the respect of other coaches and those players on other teams. The people need to adjust their thinking accordingly and get back to where they were.
That's all fine and good. Just don't lump me in with people that don't like Mike Vrabel. Like I have never once questioned Mike Vrabel. I certainly my questions about this team win-loss record in 2023 has nothing to do with 7-game losing streak, because I still think Mike Vrabel. I mean, I hope you would back me up on this, that I've always said that Mike Vrabel is among the best coaches in the NFL.
Yes, but what I'm saying is you're not weighing enough of Mike Vrabel into your analysis. I feel like
I think
that
Mike Vrabel,
has been a problem. That's not just you, but that has been a problem. I fell into that trap at some point. I've pulled myself out of it, and I've always been of the fact that since I went through the schedule and picked them to win 10 games, just 10 games before DeAndre Hopkins, I always kept coming back when I'm writing that article, Mike Vrabel, Mike Vrabel, Mike Vrabel, Mike Vrabel. Like, it just kept coming in.
Yeah, and it's, listen, I had him at 8 wins-ish, 7 or 8 wins before Hopkins. I've got him at 9 or 10-ish now. I think he's worth a win. I think it changes again, and that's to me, I think they have like a 5-win roster, and that was Mike Vrabel baked in. So we just had different perceptions of the roster, which I may be totally wrong about. I may be totally right about it. We just don't know. We'll have to find out. I think what is interesting about Hopkins is changing how the offense changes now. I think that's where they, with the second place schedule and with Vrabel, if they win 1 or 2 games that are the 50-50, 1-score, turnover style, make a kick, miss a kick type of game, that's where they win a division. They have maybe 11 wins, and that's where. But that's kind of the nature of the NFL beast. Like that's why the product is so powerful, and why everyone watches it every single Sunday for hours on end, because it's everybody can beat everybody on any given Sunday. So, all right, let's do a couple of quick camp notes here. And before we get into some analytics, which we'll wrap up with, go to Sinkers, of course, the Kingston Group as well, our proud sponsors. Mike and me, both negative Nancy's. No, I don't think so. It's okay just to think that a team
just said no. That's a negative word, man.
Yeah. Well, if I say yes, then I'm also a negative Nancy. But I'm a negative Nancy either way.
You've at least taken a step towards positivity.
As I smile the entire time. All right, first, quick. I'm going to go some quick rapid fire observations here, and then you can kind of see what you think is interesting. I don't know if Jacob Copeland is going to be this year's, like, the guy that everybody loves, and then his ass is like first cut. Yeah. I don't know, but I think he could be. He's big dude, big frame. Everyone's like, ooh, Jacob Copeland.
How's he doing in returns?
I didn't.
That's got to be his way to make it in, right? He's going to have to win the return job.
I didn't see that, but here's my ultimate point: is he is one of 14 people.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for real,
that have no chance to make the roster because there's only one spot.
You don't think he has one chance because he got a pretty good deal, good UDFA deal, and they showed him a lot of love in the pre-draft process. I mean, they spent extra time with him at his pro day. They did a lot with him. I just wonder.
There's 12 dudes for one spot.
But if he wins the return job, that's why I asked. If he wins the return job, well, then it's over, right?
No.
You don't think so?
No. Go through the list. Go through the list of guys. Okay. It is 12 dudes for one spot.
Yes.
And Colton Dowell's one of them. Mason Kinsey's one of them. Racy McMath is one of them.
Mason Kinsey's not making this team. He has never made
That's
this
what I'm
team,
saying.
So.
That's what I'm saying. But like he is in that group. I would put him behind those guys, frankly.
You'd put him behind the guy you got to listen to the words I'm saying.
Okay.
If he wins the return job, because if he wins the return job, that means Racy McMath didn't. That means that Mason Kinsey didn't. All those other guys did not. Don't you think he could make this roster if he wins that job? And that's the only way I could see him making the roster.
I hear what you're saying. I don't know if they keep a sixth receiver based exclusively on, because I do like the player. He's an interesting looking player. As I said, I think a lot of people are going to be like, "Ooh, wow," and like really like him throughout the course of camp because he's physically he's noticeable.
Yeah,
Colton Dowell, it looks like the best receiver of the bunch. Like he just
that's
does.
good. I mean, that's what you want.
Does.
If you're the Tennessee Titans, that's exactly what you want. And if you're a Titans fan, that's what you should be rooting for too.
Yes,
is that they didn't waste a 7th round pick on a guy that wasn't going to make it, but a guy that actually does. And I'll have to say, his ladder drills and his little feet videos that you guys put up there for OnlyFans on X, he's looking pretty good.
He's got very fast feet. He's got very. There's probably a whole entire OnlyFans subsection of just feet, actually. So.
That's the thing, though. Is like Jacob Copeland would have to, and I agree with you ultimately that he's not making this team, but he would have to show something on special teams for him to have any kind of chance to get on this.
Yeah. So that's my first observation is that 5 of these spots are locked up, which is kind of different, frankly, than in previous years.
So you're saying, just so we know, DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Chris Moore, NWI are the 5?
Those 5 are locked. They're locked in. So it's 12 dudes for 1 spot at wide receiver. I do think an interesting name to watch is Alize Mack. I always called him Alize Mack at Notre Dame. He played in the XFL. He is one of the only other tight ends in the state of Tennessee that can run the routes that Okonkwo runs. And he's pretty athletic. He's a big dude. And I told you guys this at minicamp and training camp. He was impressive in those situations too. Trayvon Wesco did have a really impressive down the field catch. It was like down a seam route on a nice touch pass. He made a really nice catch, but I'm not sure that's what they want him doing. So I think Mack is another one to keep an eye on. Otherwise, I think the only real discussion on offense is, and I'm going to start this with Sinkers, Beverages, and Kingston Group, of course. No, I'm going to start this with, I think the Titans are treating and need to treat MPF like an injury, and they're putting a Band-Aid on it, and that this is only 6 games, and that they are banking on MPF being back at right tackle in game number 7, and that they're just going to kitchen sink it until whoever's out there is out there.
I think that's what they're going to do.
And I don't know if it's the wrong strategy. I don't think you need to sign someone for 6 games. I don't think those 6 games decide your season or your division championship. I think they got to treat it like he got an elbow injury and he's out for 4 weeks or whatever.
Well, Mike brought up the point that, you would sign George Fant, then he would become depth. And then I'm like, well, you signed George Fant to a $2 million, $3 million contract for depth. He sits for the rest of the year, and you just wasted sort of a certain amount of money because Jamarco Jones could have probably done what he's done. And Jamarco Jones is your depth. If he makes it through all 6 games healthy, he is your depth when NPF comes back.
Right.
Same with John. And it sounds like they got depth. It sounds like to them in their head, in their minds, we don't know if this is the right strategy or not. This could be Dennis Daly all fucking over again. In their mind, they think that John Ojukwu, Jamarco Jones, maybe Jalen Duncan, they can all be versatile pieces. I mean, that's what they said about Jamarco Jones. He's versatile. He's versatile. He's versatile. These other guys could be just as versatile. They said the same thing about Jalen Duncan. And those are your depth pieces that are maneuvered around because they're versatile. And I know that it defeats the purpose that if let's say that Jamarco Jones goes down, or let's say that Andre Dillard goes down, but NPF is back. Okay, well then who are you putting over at left tackle? And then are you putting Peter over there, and then you're kind of messing around. That's almost like that for every team.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm with you. It doesn't seem like a good, you got the money. Don't get me wrong. They got the money, and it would be a drop in the bucket if they wanted to do it. But it just doesn't seem like, I don't know. I mean, do they really need to do it? It kind of feels like we know Vrabel loves Jamarco Jones because they played basketball together back in 2004 or whatever he was recruiting them. And they were playing basketball and all that kind of stuff. But he also really loves OJ, and Stoney Keeley really loves OJ. And I like OJ, and I don't know.
I do too. I do too. Brandon says 2 questions here. Brandon says, Duncan have any chance at right tackle? That's Jalen Duncan. And Zach says, Ojukwu is winning it. Here's
That's
what I would.
great for the Titans if he wins it, by the way, unless it's because Jamarco Jones lost it.
Right. like here's what I would say is that Jamarco Jones has he's a floor. Let's just call the floor X. I think Ojukwu will eventually pass X fairly quickly, but is behind X right now. I think, and Duncan is third on the list.
So you're throwing your weight behind Ojukwu. You think that's
I don't
like
think
your prediction?
I don't think right away.
By the start of the season, you think so? Like, is that what you're saying?
I don't know.
Okay.
No, I think it could be. I think it could be game 3, game 2.
They're obvious because the reports made it sound like they were splitting first team reps. Is that the safe assumption? That's what other people already said. I mean,
that's a good assumption. Okay. That's a good assumption. Now,
I don't think you're going to get in trouble because I'd be Buck tweeting it out. I just want to clarify.
No. They were rotating around, and then it's funny on special teams. They were like running up to the special teams, and like Ojukwu falls down. And somebody yells, and it was just like it wasn't a big deal. But like you can hear I think it was Vrabel, and he's like, OJ, on your feet, let's go, stay on your feet, OJ. So like he's got a ways to go.
Yeah,
Duncan is just not there, in my opinion. And I don't think Jamarco Jones has a particularly. I think he's a guy. I think he's a warm body, and I don't think if Ojukwu is. Here's what I would say: for an undrafted free agent, the path to get to where he has gotten to now is all of the things you would want to see out of an undrafted free agent. They invested money in him relative to their other UDFAs. He was the second highest paid one, I believe. He has the physical size and like 6'5", 310, like he's a big dude, athletic, can run, checks a lot of the boxes. Like it doesn't mean any of this is going to work out, but what it tells you is like the path, the TR Tart path, let's call it.
Yeah,
he's clearly on the path still, and the fact that in the first day of practice he's rotating in replacement of NPF is another box checked on the path. I just think it's going to take time for him to go from UDFA on this path to passing Jamarco Jones. I would be optimistic that happens at some point. I don't know where that point is. I don't know if that can be done in camp.
I want to ask you a few questions about that because, TR Tart notoriously was really bad his undrafted rookie year in terms of doing the drills. I mean, like people were all over him. They couldn't even hit the sleds correctly.
Oh yeah, that's right about that.
Yeah. So I go back to his 2020 season. He never had one start in that time, but he did play a few games, about roughly 29 to 30%, but he did have one start in that time. But he was so far behind. It sounds like OJ isn't as far behind as TR Tart.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
That if also sounds like that they're going to split reps in the preseason. I would assume that if they're splitting reps in practice, unless someone starts outright winning it, they're going to do some first team offensive line reps for like one drive is Ojukwu, and then the next game, another drive is going to be Jamarco with the first team. Then most of those guys leave, and then one of them stays out there. So what chance do you give OJ overtaking Jamarco if he has a TR Tart like trajectory? Because he's already a little bit ahead of that TR Tart trajectory. The reason I asked that is because of the Busted with the Boys, and Vrabel wants the guys with the fire, the want to, the will. Yeah. That's why he loves Ojukwu, because that's all the stuff that he said on Busted with the Boys is what he said in the press conference. So it seems like they're really going to take, and I also wonder what this means for NPF next year.
So here's my prediction.
Yeah.
Jamarco Jones starts games 1 and 2, maybe number 3, but that Ojukwu is the starter when NPF comes back. So gotcha. I would say 2 or 3 games of Jones, 3 or 4 games of Ojukwu. That does not mean that either one is a high-quality right tackle at this moment, but it would be a positive development for the future of the team if Ojukwu wins that job a couple of games into the season and then all of a sudden becomes your number 3 tackle behind NPF and Dillard, and all of a sudden you just found a guy like that. That would be extraordinarily positive development for the team. Even if at the start of his career as an undrafted free agent rookie, he's not exactly a high-level right tackle in the NFL. I don't think anyone should expect positive play from that position. It doesn't mean it's not a positive long-term development if he wins the job by week 3 or 4, which I think that would be my prediction, is that Jones starts 1 and 2, maybe 3. Ojukwu takes over, plays 2 or 3 games. NPF comes back and takes his spot, and Ojukwu then spends the rest of the season filling in where needed as a swing tackle that is learning how to be a professional. And that then gives him a chance to compete next year for a starting job. That would be my sort of long-term vision of that particular position. I think I don't, we talked about the secondary being pretty physical and the game energy intensity being up. I noticed that. We could talk Levis and Willis here for a second, because Willis was fascinating. He was basically the number running with the 2s, and Willis was in 7-on-7. Willis looked like the player Mike Vrabel was talking about, quote unquote, glaring progress? What did he say?
Glaring improvement.
He made tight window throws in rhythm like 4, 5, or 6 in a row. Pretty impressive. I was like, oh, okay, that looks like glaring improvement. We were joking on the sidelines, like, oh, that looks like glaring improvement. 7-on-7. The second the defensive and offensive lines got on the field, he couldn't make a decision. And he went right back to scrambling first, looking for his legs. And so
you're the first person to say that, by the way. So, like, I think that's very important that is out there. That 7-on-7 he looks great. 11-on-11, old Malik Willis reared his head.
And I would say that commentary is still improvement from Malik Willis. I saw throws that I don't think he made last year, even in just one practice, one drill. He made again tight window throws over the middle, between the linebacker, underneath the safety. Like he was doing it, and I was like, oh, okay, that looks different. That looks like improvement. And then I saw the same Malik Willis from last year for a big chunk of the time when they were in team drills, and I think that's kind of where I expected. Yeah, like I think it's improvement, but I think that's kind of where I expected Malik Willis to be. Is still very raw, very talented, better, but not a guy that looks like a starting NFL quarterback yet.
What'd you see from Will Levis in the same drills, like the transition from 7-on-7 to 11-on-11?
A little bit more command of what's happening. There's clearly no question about that, but also playing with lesser players, but also against lesser players. So it's kind of hard to tell. A couple of nice touch throws. I think he hit like a tight end on a corner route. I think he hit somebody down the seam that was pretty nice. He looks, again, I'll say this, like I said at minicamp and OTAs, he is further along at this stage than Willis was last year at the same spot.
Yeah.
That does not mean that he is ahead of Willis today.
Yeah.
Meaning head-to-head directly. So Willis looks better. Levis looks like he will be better than Willis. And Ryan Tannehill is 1,000,000% your starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Ryan Tannehill looked really good in minicamp and OTAs and looked really good on Wednesday. So
yeah,
he looks like he likes having number 10 out there. I'll tell you that.
I'm sure he does.
So I don't know. I think it's fascinating to watch the Levis and Willis thing play out. They need to know by like November, December-ish, like pretty clearly someone needs to have grabbed the second string job stranglehold and said, I am the dude for next year. You got to come take my job from me.
Yeah.
So I assume that's Levis, but we'll see. Okay. So I had a chance to chat with Chad Brinker, who is the assistant GM for strategy, Zach, not the assistant GM for personnel, which is Anthony Robinson, of course. Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group. Check them out, by the way. Great build out of our clients, just like they're trying to build out the analytics department for the Tennessee Titans. Sarah Bailey, of course, is the director of football research and development. Chad Brinker said a bunch of things in his press conference that were pretty vague. He said, we're building out systems, right? He's a former scout. Models, right? And he says like things that are going to help with like coaching, sports science, medical, cap stuff. One of the things that he mentioned just in casual, off the record conversation, I think from what I think I can say this, is that like the golden holy grail of like what an analytics person wants to discover is predicting injuries. I think that is like the holy grail of analytics. Like,
yeah,
the number one thing you do with analytics is you marry it to the tape, which is very much what Rand Carthon has said, right, in his whole career.
And even Chad Brinker said it starts with the tape, ends with the tape.
Yep, it starts with the tape. You add a lot of data to it. You finish with the tape. That's scouting. I think they want to use AI analytics, predictive stuff, and tracking to be progressive about what they can learn about the human body and about their players. And I think from what I gathered is the thing that no one in the NFL has figured out, but the thing that everyone wants is how to predict injuries.
So you're basically saying that we're in an NFL arms race in this analytics data to be the first ones to try and have
I think so.
the injury information, which
I
he's brought up the injury thing quite a few times. And have found that very interesting because I've been, I'm a big data guy. So like, I understand what they're doing with the coaching. I mean, I just wrote a whole article about all that kind of stuff that they're probably going to be giving the coaches. I understand about the salary cap data and all this stuff. I am so interested to see how they take data from certain injuries, and I'm sure they marry it to weight, size, position, and then see how many games or maybe that injury reoccurs and all that kind of stuff. It's a very intricate thing to try to figure out a probability of, okay, this player is going to get injured because we do this. Here's what we need to avoid in practice, or who we need to avoid in free agency or in the draft. I'm with you. I think it's very interesting. I'd love to be a part of it. If anybody is listening, next time you talk to Chad, tell him I got a guy that will come work for you for really cheap, and I will just listen. I don't care if all they give me is just the data and I have to be the monkey at the typewriter that just puts it all in for him. I'll do
it. What's interesting is I think, Vrabel's clearly adjusted his practice philosophy and strategy based on data, like GPS data, work rate, whatever. Like they're doing walkthroughs instead of jog throughs now. Like he's clearly had it at his disposal before and used it to sort of frame how they've evolved in their camp execution each of the last 3 or 4 years. I just think that's the thing. I think you put it right. It's an arms race to try to figure out who's got the best predictive model on the human body, which, by the way, is insane. That is an insane thing to try to do, because you could have all the data in the world on two players that are exact same height, weight, work ethic, right? Data, and their knee ligaments could still be different. I find it utterly fascinating that. And there was a lot of other stuff that
they're in a good city to be in the lead for this with Vanderbilt Medical. I mean, they have resources at their disposal.
We are a healthcare hub. There's of the entire country basically. So it is. There's a lot of stuff that data and analytics and metrics and the entire department that they are in the process of building out is going to help with. And that includes scouting college players, scouting NFL players, that includes scouting coaches, that includes scouting other teams, that includes sports science, that includes cap and data on cap spending and, Billy Bean style management of resources. It includes a lot of things, but I do think that the one that you can just see a sparkle in a guy's eyes, when something comes up. And I think the holy grail of every analytics department in sports is going to be predicting injury. And I think that is wild to think about.
Yeah. I love it.
It's interesting. And somebody asked me this. I was on in Knoxville. I go do Josh Ward and Jason Swain's show every week. And they asked me, what was the biggest difference now that Rand Carthon's in charge, right? How is it different? And the first thing I said was there's a lightness to the building because he's a players first relationship guy, right? There's just a different energy in how people communicate and how people talk. He's, as I've said all along, he's not out there swinging his whistle with the chaw in his mouth, ready to yell at people. He's very player-driven personality type. But number two is analytics. They are building out an entire department filled with a lot of different people and to do a lot of different things that are very forward-thinking. And I'll just say this. Most humans do not leave Green Bay to come to Tennessee unless they are given an opportunity to move up.
Yeah.
And that is clearly what Chad Brinker is doing, is coming here to implement his thing. And I think Rand likes it. So it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't know if it means a lot right now. They haven't really shown us any like specific metric that decided a specific decision, right? Like they haven't, we haven't seen any of that yet. But what does it look like next year in the offseason when we can talk about it again with them? I don't know. It'll be very interesting to watch. So keep an eye on it. And Sinker and Kingston Group.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. We got football and other efforts. We got stackingtheinbox.com. We got Sinkers Beverages. We got the Kingston Group. We got all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. By the way, please go vote. If you are a Davidson County resident, please go vote. Please go vote. I know you're not, but please go vote.
Nope.
Just if you're listening and there are 420,000 registered active voters in Davidson County, and about 100,000 of you are going to vote. Please, the other 300,000, please go vote. Like, be a part of the process. That's all I ask next Thursday, please. Otherwise, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for commenting. We do appreciate you. Rate, review, subscribe. Buy all your booze from Sinkers and make all your house decisions with the Kingston Group. Read all your Titans gear, your Titans information at stackingtheinbox.com. And thank you guys for listening. Have a great weekend. For Zach, I am Braden. We'll talk to you next week.